So get this. The ancient Egyptians, those pyramid-building, afterlife-obsessed geniuses, were once ruled by outsiders, total strangers from another land. And get this. Egypt didn't even notice them sneaking in until they were already in charge. But now, the real question is, who were these people the Egyptians feared so much that they tried to wipe them from memory? And why did Egypt spend the next 400 years making sure it never happened again? Well, the first thing we ought to ask is, who were they? Surely, they were not some mythical foreign horde. They were in fact a real dynasty. The Hyksos, they were called. They ruled Lower Egypt during the Second Intermediate Period, roughly 1650 to 1550 BC. Now, the word Hyksos comes from the Egyptian title Hekakasut, which was later Greekified, meaning rulers of foreign lands. It's a polite way of saying outsiders in the Nile Delta. In truth, they were a small elite tribe of West Asian origin, likely from the Levant, what we'd now call Canaan, and they worked their way to power. They're even listed in Egyptian king lists, like the Turin Canon, as the 15th dynasty. Culturally, they were Semitic. Archaeology from Avaris, which is modern Tel el-Daba, reveals Canaanite temples, Syrian-style palaces, and Near Eastern grave goods. Yet you also find Egyptian pottery, burial practices, and even Minoan-style frescoes. You see, it wasn't a violent takeover. More like a gradual change, a power grab from within as Memphis and Thebes weakened. One scholar notes that there's no sound evidence supporting the invasion tale. They simply stepped into the throne room and declared kingship. But they didn't go full foreigner. Like we said before, they adopted Egyptian throne names, carved monuments in hieroglyphs, worshipped Egyptian gods, mostly. Yet they held on to Hekakasut and kept their Semitic names. Take Pepi, also called Apophis by Egyptian scribes, who later got mixed up with the chaos serpent Apep. The Hyksos also brought their own gods, like Baal and Anat, and sometimes equated Baal with Set, the storm god. They ran the administration with a hybrid model, Egyptian bureaucracy, mixed with Amorite tribal customs. A cuneiform tablet fragment found at Avaris even points to diplomatic ties with Babylon. So, again, they weren't Egyptian, but they became Egyptian enough, until the Egyptian priests and scribes freaked out. That is, statue fragments from Avaris show Asiatic officials with that iconic mushroom-shaped hairstyle. Totally not Egyptian. It drives home how West Asian people rose into power under Hyksos rule. To the ancient Egyptians, the Hyksos takeover was nothing short of traumatic. Imagine foreign rulers actually wearing the white and red crowns. First time ever. Late 17th dynasty and early New Kingdom texts are filled with utter hatred for these Asiatics. Take Pharaoh Kamose of Thebes, for instance. On his stele, he fumes. One prince is in Avaris, another in Kush, and here I am, sandwiched with an Asiatic and a Nubian. No one can settle down. Egypt is being milked dry by Asiatic taxes. I will grapple with him, cut open his belly. My wish is to save Egypt and smite the Asiatics. You feel the anger, right? It's totally playing on deeper fears than just war. The Hyksos, after all, were framed as a drain, bleeding Egypt dry. So, Egyptian leaders fanned that fear to rally the troops, and the Hyksos became the perfect villains, nearly cartoon evil in royal propaganda. Then, fast forward to Hatshepsut at Speos Artemidos, and she's still riding that wave. She writes about Asiatics in the midst of Avaris, ruling without reverence for the gods. And then she boasts, I have banished the abomination of the gods, and the earth has removed their footprints. Abomination of the gods! That's definitely not subtle. It paints them as a spiritual contamination, an infestation to be wiped out. This was politics after all, and by stoking fear, the Theban kings cast their war as a holy mission, to restore Ma'at, cosmic order. And so they molded the narrative. Hyksos equals brutal oppressors, temple burners, enslavers. And kings like Kamose and Ahmose I used that to justify total reunification. Even later, scribes kept them on the forecourt of memory. There's a tale of the Hyksos king Apophis whining about noisy hippos in Thebes, which turned out to be an absurd anecdote, mocking him as irrational. Again, it's propaganda dressed as humor. But now the question remains, why did the Hyksos inspire such fear? Well, for one thing, they showed up with military tricks Egypt had never seen before. We're talking horse-drawn chariots, which changed the game. Spoked wheels, speed, power. On foot, Egyptian soldiers looked vulnerable against lightning-fast platforms of archers. So, those chariots were likely the real reason the Hyksos grabbed the delta. But then came the composite bow, which was a mix of wood, horn, and sinew. It had way more range and punch than Egypt's simple self-bows. Taught by Syrian fighters, the composite bow became what one historian calls Egypt's superweapon. Now just imagine, volleys of archers from chariots raining down hell on poorly armored foot troops. But it didn't stop there. The Hyksos also had better metalwork, bronze casting skills newcomers brought from the Near East. Before them, however, Egyptians mostly used short daggers or soft copper blades. And then suddenly, long bronze swords appeared in Egypt for the very first time. And you know that iconic curved khopesh that we mentioned in an earlier episode? Yeah, it was borrowed straight from Canaanite swordsmiths. So, in some ways, Egyptians later thanked, or, owed, a nod to the Hyksos for that deadly design. Battle axes got an upgrade too. They were narrow bronze blades that sliced through armor. Think of them as the AK-47s of their time. Even spears went from fragile wood to cast bronze tips that could pierce defenses. And then there's tactics. You see, these guys knew fortress warfare and hit-and-run skirmishes, and all that came from crowded Levant city-states. And in turn, they built walls and earthworks around Avaris, the Hyksos capital. Who knows? Maybe they even fell in with other foreign powers like Kush to the south. Egyptian records say Hyksos king Apophis tried to team up with Nubia to flank Thebes. But whether it's true or not, it still shows Egyptians believed the Hyksos could open a second front. Again, none of this was just rumor. The Hyksos had the gear, the weapons, and the battlefield know-how. That's how they seized and held Egypt's richest lands. The Hyksos' rise and the wars against them forged the new kingdom. Around 1650 BC, as the Middle Kingdom fractured, Hyksos chieftains in Avaris began taking charge of the delta. first by controlling trade routes and garrisons, and then by pushing south. They even occupied Memphis, the sacred city of Ptah. So, imagine the shock. Egypt's spiritual heart under foreign rule. And when Memphis fell, statues were defaced, and its majesty was carted off to avarice. The Hyksos reached deep into Egypt, though Thebes in the south and some delta chiefs held firm. Even Hermopolis felt their control, and Upper Egypt paid taxes to them. But then came a decades-long stalemate. Hyksos in the north, Thebans under the 17th dynasty in the south, and Kush beyond. And then, finally, Thebes struck back. Seqenenre-Tao launched the first blow, and he died for it. His badly damaged mummy tells a brutal story of deep gashes and an axe wound to the forehead from a Hyksos-style weapon. And so, his son Kamose picked up the fight. The Carnarvon tablet and stele at Karnak record Kamose's raids deep into Hyksos lands. He proudly describes destroying the outpost at Nefrusi and even besieging Avaris. He even intercepted a Hyksos courier begging Kush for help. He calls the Hyksos vermin and vows to wipe them out. But Kamose ruled for only 3 years. His campaign ended with him, with Avaris still standing, revenge unfinished. The job of finishing the war fell to Ahmose I, his younger brother, or son. By about 1550 BC, Ahmose tightened the noose around Avaris. Soldiers and scribes recorded fierce battles. The Rind papyrus notes entries like Heliopolis was entered, and the fortress of Jaru fell. One soldier, Ahmose son of Abana, recounts a naval fight at Avaris and its eventual plunder. Ahmose's campaigns, nonetheless, were methodical, delta stronghold by stronghold, south to north. Each victory chipped away at Hyksos power until the capital fell and Egypt was whole again. Then finally came the siege of Avaris, the Hyksos capital. Ahmose, son of Ebena, boasts in his tomb, when the city fell, he personally slew 2 Hyksos warriors and earned the gold of valor, not once, but twice. The pharaoh, Ahmose I, sacked the city and distributed plunder and captives. Pretty thorough takeover. The Hyksos king, likely Kamudi, who was Apophis's successor, and his remaining forces fled northeast to Sharuhen in southern Canaan. But Ahmose didn't stop at the border. He chased them and laid siege to Sharuhen for 3 years. And then he crushed it. And that marked the final expulsion of the Hyksos. Manetho, the later historian, started a new dynasty from this event. But hold on a minute. The strange thing that happened was, archaeologists at Avaris found no scorched earth layer. So, apparently, the city wasn't burned to ashes. It seems it was taken intact. And not only that, but a sizable Asiatic population remained into the early New Kingdom. Traders or maybe craftsmen under Egyptian supervision. So the Hyksos rulers lost power, but not every Asiatic was expelled. Nevertheless, in Egyptian memory, this series of events, the fall of Memphis, Kamose's bold hits, street-by-street fighting in Avaris, it all became legendary. Egyptians later claimed the Hyksos were easily overpowered and brutally punished, even though it was a long, bloody war. And these battles, they taught Egypt hard lessons in warfare. Lessons they wouldn't soon forget.